Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this episode of 62 Who Knew. I want to thank you very much. As always, I want to thank my guests for the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, we had Miss Laura Banner, founder of, I forgot what she's founder of, but she's a national expert on Alzheimer's disease, on Alzheimer's, speaks throughout the country on it. And it's funny, our 4 largest shows for the last 58 weeks of showing shows have been always on. When I say largest audience, have been on long-term care insurance, reverse mortgages, Medicare, and Alzheimer's and other types of dementia. And it just came back to me. Her website is Compassionate Education. So go to www.compassionateeducation.com to learn a lot about dementia. It was a great show. Last week we had a show that was all about reverse mortgages, and I'd like to thank the national expert that was on last week, so let me do that. Thank you. You're welcome. It was a pleasure being on. So because that was me. So that was last week. And this week, because, not just because that it's long-term care insurance awareness month, but because these are our 2 favorite guests, or 2 of our favorite guests, and also 2 of my favorite people that I've ever met. We all know each other now for more than a decade. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to be joined by Mr. Bill Comfort and Mr. Mark Goldberg, 2 icons in the long-term care insurance world. There's so much happening in that world that we all need to be aware of. Again, as you know, the premise of 62 Who Knew, we always start with the premise for our new viewers, for everybody's information. For the last quarter, for the first time ever, we are averaging more than 85,000 viewers per week. Thank you so much. I don't think I have much to do with that. I say that every week for 55 weeks. It's always the guests, the quality of guests that we have, and tonight is the best example of that. But what is the premise of 62 Who Knew, for those of you that are just joining us for the first time? Well, as we approach 62, whether it be in your mid-50s, late 50s, almost everyone as you approach 62, even though you've been thinking about retirement for some time, that number 62, that sticks. That goes, okay, are we going to take Social Security? Or should we defer it for a later point in life? Should I keep working? Should I have long-term care insurance? Should I cash in my life insurance? The questions are endless as we approach that magic number of 62. And what's interesting about that is, as somebody that is approaching that age very quickly myself, my father, his father, all of your fathers and their fathers, we all had those same questions about Social Security, income, should I pay off my mortgage, life insurance, long-term care insurance. Everybody has the same questions, generation after generation, except for this generation, except for my generation. We have one other obstacle to overcome, one more bump in the road. And what is it? It's the double-edged sword, the mixed blessing, if you would, of longer lifespans. Because today in this country, if you live to be 65 and you're in a married couple, the odds are 50-50 that one of you is going to make it to 90. 65 to 90. Let's do the math. That's 25 years. And the truth of the matter is less than 1% of the United States of America has the financial wherewithal to make it from 65 to 90. So who knew at 62 you still had 2 to 3 decades still to go in your life? And that's what we pride ourselves on here at 62 Who Knew, is bringing on guests every week to talk about relative topics that make that planning from your mid-50s, upper 50s, right to 62, right to 90, 95. And as we learn a few times in the past year from our guest from the Weizmann Institute in Israel, and we're going to talk about that with our 2 guests tonight, soon that 90 years old is going to be 95 and 100. And I don't mean soon like in a generation, soon as in soon. So without further ado, I want to bring on just 2 of my favorite people ever, Mr. Mark Goldberg and Mr. Bill Comfort. And we're going to bring them on screen. And there they are.
Well, hello, Michael.
Well, Mark, welcome back. You're a regular on the show. And Bill, thank you for being here.
You're very
Yeah, Michael, why is it whenever I'm on a show with you, you constantly pair me with someone who's much better looking, much smarter, overall just, has that cool, smooth demeanor?
You
Is
know,
it a conspiracy to make me look second rate?
you know
Because
what's
if it is, it's working.
well, what's interesting is that that's all true even when it's just you and I. So I think that's really
You
interesting.
set him up for that one, Mark.
You did.
That's why I'm here, Bill.
That was a
I
high.
set him up and he knocks him down.
That was a high, soft lob right over the middle of the plate for the old half-blind, the whole half-blind guy. So let's first talk. I wasn't aware that there was a long-term care awareness month. Is this the first one, or has it been around forever? Whichever one of you want.
For a long time, but Bill can talk to it better than I can. But I don't know. It's got to be 20 years old already, right, Bill?
Oh my
I
God!
think so. We're 15, 18 years. It started by an association that existed to promote long-term care insurance awareness among insurance agents. I think it's actually one of those things, whether it's permanent or is something that we all now just follow. But I think Congress even recognized at one point.
They did. They made it official.
Wow.
As being a national. I think anybody can make up a name of awareness. In fact, this evening it's the Mark Goldberg awareness show, at least
Yes.
part-time here.
Awareness is correct. People need to be more aware. But in all sincerity, I don't think it was an accident that November was chosen as LTC Awareness Month to coincide with the fact that that is also the month that Thanksgiving comes. And when it comes to long-term care, it's absolutely a family issue. And when is it that more of us get together than any time than Thanksgiving? So, this is particularly an important time for people who haven't seen each other, but maybe once or twice during the year, who all of a sudden get together and they hear the stories about people within their family or extended family that needed some sort of care.
And it's interesting when you look at the home care agency, assisted living facilities, nursing homes, placements in a facility or hiring of professional home care aides, that typically spikes in January and February, which of course, as you suggest, Mark, follows the holidays when everybody's together. Family hasn't seen family in a long time. Sometimes the adult kids haven't seen parents, grandparents, older family members in a while. They gather for Thanksgiving, the other holidays. And I think not only are we approaching the holidays, but I think November's a great month. It's kind of a quiet month in a way. December, we get into the heat of all the Christmas and other holiday shopping, and Thanksgiving's reflective.
Yes.
And I think talking about this even ahead of Thanksgiving is important, because hopefully there's some things we can share with you this evening, not only to begin thinking about, but maybe even begin looking for in your family, or having some of the conversations as you gather for Thanksgiving and the holidays that are right around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bill, you bring that up, and I sent Mike, our esteemed producer here, John, a couple of stats. And the one at the top, which, whether you can put it up or not, but I wanted to share with you as sort of a way to kick this off. And I think you're aware of this, because Roy, you're not only the king of stats, but you're the one that taught me that 52% of them are made up. So
47.3 was the most recent study.
I thought it was 86.3.
But the stat was that, and I thought your audience would find this interesting, Michael, of all the people in the history of the world that has ever lived to see age 65, more than 50% of those people are alive and on the planet today.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. That's just unbelievable.
So again, when you said earlier about your father and dealing with these issues and the past generations, not so much.
Yeah.
It's really been this. Another stat that I shared is that again, life expectancy over the last 50 years has increased more dramatically and more rapidly than the 200,000 years before that.
That's staggering when you think about it.
And I think one of the things that is helpful, and this is an introduction to this long-term care awareness show in the middle of Long-Term Care Awareness Month, is to recognize that this is also something that we're still learning to deal with as a country, as a society, but even more specifically in families. Mm-hmm. We don't have multiple generations of really good, successful history of navigating caring for our old, or more specifically, older family members who need care, who have some impairments, some limitations, however that's measured, wherever they are in the continuum. Yeah, there certainly have been 2-3 generations of families where folks have lived a long time and needed care. But Mark, that statistic that half of the people who've ever reached age 65 are still alive today.
Yeah, it
that
blows
just
my mind every time I hear it.
Yeah, we're still learning about this, and in fact, we're still growing and developing resources, professional resources to help take care of people, community resources, service resources, and even the insurance products that are designed to help people plan for and pay for professional caregiving. Those are really only about 25 years old, particularly in the comprehensive quality that we know of them today. So it's maybe not in its infancy, but I think we're certainly past our adolescence, but still very much maturing at this point in experience.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the nose as usual, Bill. It is something that's still in its embryonic stage. Okay, maybe past like that. You said past its adolescence, but in its young 20s, approaching 30, and yet there's so much to go and so much change happening. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing as well. I mean, look at our industry in the beginning. You know, I read a stat. I think it was our friend Mr. Hagelman a couple months ago, wrote an article in which he said, of all the people that are going to purchase traditional long-term care this coming year, you couldn't fill a college football stadium. But the hybrid business has skyrocketed, where it's going to be over 500,000 people that will have purchased or looked at one of those kinds of programs, purchased one way or another, invested in one of those kind of programs. So again, we're seeing that shift, that we originally started out with one concept, and as things have changed and we've learned more, we've modified and improvised and came up with new plans and new ways to approach all this.
I think in some ways I feel like we're jumping ahead a bit with the long-term care insurance, because that really answers a kind of a final question. How would you pay for professional care if you needed to? Where, you know, what is long-term care? What's the impact? What are the things to look for, look out for? Where do you start the planning? But this is part of the growth, I think, and the beginning to mature into adulthood, if we want to kind of play that analogy out, that we have all of these options now. We have many, many different ways to plan for, pay for, insure for professional care, long-term care, extended care, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's just starting to be innovative that way. Yeah, I'm sorry, Michael.
No, it's okay. This is going to be one of those shows that I'm just happy to listen to both of you. But one of the things that staggers me, and it staggered me for 10 years now, and I'm sure it staggered you for 2 or 3 times that, you know, again, I'm not going to say I'm lucky, but I'm definitely blessed, you know, to have a handful of people, you know, like you two. I'm not a long-term care insurance expert, but thanks to knowing both of you, Carol Golden, and of course all our hero Peter Gelbwax, I do get to have more knowledge than your average reverse mortgage person, thanks to the 4 of you. And it still just staggers me, even in my looking from the outside in, you know, still the misconceptions about this great product. And that kind of fits in with what you're both saying. The product, is in its adolescence, maybe past its adolescence into its 20s, but most of us weren't that smart in their 20s. Life insurance is, of course, an accepted way of life, and I think that's one of the reasons why the hybrid products, and I'm going to need you to explain hybrid to the audience in a much better way than I can, but I think when it's brought up as part of life insurance, pretty much everybody at every age goes, oh yeah, life insurance, we need that. They're not at that point where they'll say, oh, long-term care insurance, I need that. They don't say that, but they do. Do you think the fact that life insurance is an acceptable part of everybody's life is helping with the hybrid products? Somebody?
What do you think, Bill?
Well, the fact that there's a life insurance connection to, and there's long-term care insurance benefits that are now connected to annuities, as well as the sort of traditional health care disability insurance kind of model of long-term care insurance. But I think the life insurance connection is one. We've had life insurance in the United States for 250 years or something.
Yeah.
So it's a product, it's a concept people understand, they're comfortable with. To sort of throw out one of my favorite statistics, and it's actually the only one that we can truly prove without a doubt, and that's at some point in your life, the risk of dying is quite high. In fact, it's exactly 100%.
Yes.
So the perception that life insurance will ultimately provide a benefit, no matter what else happens, is something people know. They understand it. It's a simple concept. So adding a provision that lets you access your death benefit to spend that money while you need care, if that's a more valuable use of those insurance dollars you've purchased, is a fairly simple concept for folks. And I think that has driven a big part of the growth of those types of products. There's many variations on that, and we could maybe get into that a little later. I think the bigger thing here, really the message that I'm always wanting people to take away, is it doesn't matter whether you buy life insurance with a long-term care benefit or annuity or some other form of long-term care insurance. The real place to start is this going to happen? And of course we don't know, none of us want it to, but if it happens, if we need care, if we're impaired, if we can't safely get through the day, physically or mentally, how are we going to deal with that? How's our family going to deal with that? And that leads to recognizing that you got to have some money at hand to pay for some professional care. And so this long-term care awareness month is important, not just to be aware of the insurance product, but also what happens when families need care and what the impact is and what you can and need to do to get ahead of it, to plan ahead for it.
Absolutely.
Michael, if I may, let me pick up on 2 points Bill just made, because I actually want to get his thoughts on the second one. But Bill, you have always been a huge proponent of the fact that it doesn't matter what product you use. What matters is that you have a plan.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a plan, then everything you've saved and everything you've tucked, that becomes your plan. Without a plan, everything becomes your plan. And so having a strategy in advance while you're still healthy on how you're going to deal with this is such a huge game changer in all likelihood over the course of your life that it can't be stressed enough about the importance of putting such things like that.
Let's start here. Let's start with this point. And it's really, Michael, you inviting us to the show tonight to talk about long-term care awareness. Everyone has a plan for care. Everyone has a plan for care right now today. The problem is most people don't understand the default plan is, number one, relying on your spouse to the point of impacting dramatically his or her own health, life, and lifestyle, relying on your kids, extended family, friends, whatever. That's the first place. Those are the folks who are going to naturally step in. Why? They love you. They need to know you're safe. They need to help make sure you're safe. That's the plan everybody has right now. Even if you said, I want my kids to take care of me. Oh, I wouldn't want to do that for my spouse. Well, without setting up another plan, that is the default plan you have in place. Second piece of that default plan is the financing of it. People talk about, oh, I'm going to self-insure, or can I self-insure or self-fund for long-term care? And one of the things that I like to point out is self-funding, self-insuring, that's not a choice you make in the future. That's the plan everyone has by default already today. And the question is, can you afford it? Or in affording it, in paying for it yourself, what else would that do? What would the other consequences be financially? And you have to play that out. So the initial awareness here, and Mark, it's great. We always ping pong with each other this way on these ideas, which is great. The first thing to be aware of is you have a plan. But the plan that most people have is not the plan that they really want.
Failure to have a plan is a plan to fail. There's no doubt.
Exactly. And it is a failure financially and personally for many people. And we read the stories about that all the time.
Yeah.
So I ran across, here's the second point I wanted to make to you, Bill, and I want your opinion too, Michael, on this. Because I've been in this business 30 years as a long-term care specialist. And I could say to you that this caught me as a fresh definition, if you will, about insurance that I hadn't heard before. And then basically it said insurance is about intervention. It's about intention to restructure the potential outcome of a highly likely adverse future possibility. So the point being that things are likely to happen. Again, I know Bill doesn't like this stat, and I don't blame him because I think it's misused too. But the stat that's floated around forever is that 70% of a couple of somebody, of couples, at least one person will need long-term care. Well, when the stats are that high, what you're doing with insurance is in effect disrupting that equation as to whether or not you're going to be part of that problem. Because when you have a third party who's going to pay the bills, that opens up and frees so many other things to make care possible for you that, frankly, someone who isn't in a position to be able to pay for that is going to find themselves being able to easily tackle. What's your thoughts about that definition there, Bill?
Well, just back to the basic definition, the basic concept that insurance as a product, and it is one that it's a positive disruption or a positive redirection of premium dollars into potential protection benefits if something happens. It is a great definition. That's the core idea. And really, if you think about it, just to take a contrarian view on the statistics, and we don't really need to get into that because the risk of needing long-term care, the risk of using a long-term care insurance policy is dramatically higher than most other things that we insure for.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Readily acknowledge the need for and spend the money on month in and month out as it is. And that's this. Even if the risk were very small, the consequences, the impact on people first, your spouse, your partner, your kids, others who you love, or as I said before, who love you and would have no choice but to step in and help make sure you're safe by helping take care of you. The consequences to those other people really compel the need to look at this and take it seriously, let alone the fact that it's 10, if not 100 times greater with significant impact than other things we insure for all the time.
But the problem,
when you think about it in terms of Las Vegas makes its fortune off the statistics, the rule of large numbers, which is exactly what's applicable to insurance as well. And They know that if X amount of dollars gets wagered, they're going to put Y amount in their pocket. We know that if we live our life, a certain percentage of people, a significant percentage of people, are going to need long-term care. If you have the ability to intervene on those statistics and make sure that you're not one of those people because you put a plan in place, you change the game and you move the edge to your side of the house.
Right.
And that's simply, I mean, I don't know how many other places you can do that in life.
Right.
I think the other concept, and Michael, your specialty, reverse mortgages, and some of the other things you've covered on this show really help provide opportunity, flexibility, and at the end of the day, money to help take care of yourself, at the same time you're keeping other financial commitments, to your spouse or your kids. Nobody wants to need care. Nobody wants to have a kitchen fire either. And in fact, nobody lays awake in bed at night wishing that they'd have a big kitchen fire because some, homeowners company's been ripping you off for 20 years. The nature of insurance is very much we don't want to use it.
That's right. Yeah.
But if we would need to use it, man, there is nothing else that can deliver the change that Mark's talking about.
I want to go
Bill
back.
makes a very important distinction there too. Bill and I do not have the power to keep you from getting sick. We don't have, and the insurance doesn't either. All it does is help you deal with the consequences of needing long-term care. In a financial sense, in an emotional sense, and all the other senses that having a cash flow to be able to pay for care will you with. It's not like, because you get the policy isn't going to stop from needing care. All it's saying is that if you need care, here's another way to go about it and not have to have it fall on that hard-earned life savings you put away.
Well, I want to go back to two things, and it's back about 3-4 minutes. Two things. One of the things that you said, Bill, that people are aware and they accept the cost of other types of insurance and they pay it monthly, but they're more apt to use long-term care insurance. And I think, I'm not going to say it's stupidity, but I'm going to say it's between ignorance and maybe even ego with a little love thrown in there. But using myself as an example, my dad's been gone about 14 and a half years. But when he first developed congestive heart failure, the last year of his life, I thought to myself, you both know how close I was with him, this is my dad. I'm going to take care of him. It was only like 9 months into it that I really did realize, now suddenly I'm not running my mortgage company and other things were suffering, and Dad did not have long-term care insurance. He was a very highly decorated World War II veteran, so between that and his Medicare supplement, he was well taken care of. But I thought I was fairly intelligent in my mid-40s, but I had no idea, none. I was proud. I'm taking care of my dad. But 6 months, 8 months into it, I turned around and went, my God, I need help. I don't think people in their, and I'm not going to say pride, because I know pride is one of the worst sins. But I think out of love, sometimes they go, well, that's my mother, that's my father. God forbid, that's my son, that's my daughter. I'm going to take care of them. They're not saying that egotistically. I just don't think most people realize what it takes to be a caregiver. And I know the statistics that I don't have memorized that you said, Mark, I think the second time you were on the show about a year ago, about the caretakers predeceasing the people that they're taking care of. That gave me the chills and still gives me the chills when you bring it up. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up just quickly, and then I'm letting you two take over again, because I know about the statistics. We had the 3 and 4, need more with our friend Jonas Rosa, and some people say 75% of people are going to need long-term care. Some people say 70. One of the many, many things I learned from Bill, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, at a long-term care convention, I think in Texas, where I was speaking on reverse mortgages. And of course, I went to listen to Bill speak. And I may be misquoting you, so correct me if I am, but you were talking about the statistics that you truly didn't like. But here was the truth. You said, I think, I hope I'm quoting it correctly. It's going to come down to, Either you're going to need it or you're not. So the true statistic is 50-50. You're going to need it or not. There is no in between. And I remember you saying that in your way, because when you speak, you're so emotional when you deliver your messages. And I went, oh my God, he's right. You can do all the statistics in the world, but it does boil down to either you're going to need it or you're not. And if you can insure against it and the cost, and especially with all your return of premium riders, I just don't get, and I know this is pure ignorance on my part, why everybody in their 40s and 50s and 60s is not getting long-term care insurance. Your industry is basically taking the risk out, the financial risk. How can no one not want it? I just don't get it. It's frustrating as heck.
Yeah, and just a slight. And numbers are funny. You know, we throw numbers around, and different people perceive them in different ways. As a 25 plus year veteran of long-term care insurance sales, but also as an educator and of my clients and other agents and advisors. You know, if you tell somebody, hey, there's a 50% chance you're going to need care, it's a natural human reaction to think it's not going to happen to me. It's going to be the other guy. Now, that's not wishing ill on another. That's the way we're wired. That's the way our brains work. So this denial of not wanting to face the fact that it could happen is in some ways a very natural human psychological reaction. And what I see my job, what Mark and I do day in and day out first, and I hope what part of the takeaway is from this show is that the awareness is that not to accept that it will happen, but if it does, that need for a plan to provide for myself, and more importantly, to protect my family, protect my finances that pay for everything else that's important to me in my life, for myself and the rest of my family and those I love. That's really the process we want to engage in. So here's the number that I use. It's not that it's 50-50. It's for any individual. It's either 0 or 100. In other words, you are either going to need long-term care or you're not. So any person, Michael, you or me or Mark, it's not 1 out of 3. It's not 50-50. It's not 70%. For each of us, it's either 0 or 100. And of course, 0 is easy. If it doesn't happen, thank God. If it does happen, we need to have a plan. And I think kind of back to what are the solutions, and you alluded to this, Michael, why don't people have a plan, particularly when they can put money into an insurance policy?
Yeah, I don't get it.
That would, if it's 0, if it doesn't happen to you, at least you or your estate gets all your premium back.
Yeah.
I mean,
where's the risk?
Yeah. Well, the risk is tying up money up front, right? I mean, the risk is having to commit to a plan before
but
it
you're
happens.
getting in exchange. I mean, so again, it's not like the money's not earning money. It's just not earning money like it might in the markets these days.
Right.
But it's getting a return, and at the same time, it's giving you a long-term care policy that says one way or another someone's going to get paid.
So, Mark, let me ask you. You not only sell long-term care insurance, you work with other financial professionals, attorneys, CPAs, and a team of other insurance agents. And I think your experience is exactly like mine. So many people come to us really when it's too late. Or almost too late. They've just put it off so long. And I think that's another just sort of line in the sand I'd like to put on the table during this awareness conversation.
Well, I think that's you're right. I think that's perfectly rightful for where you've got to act when you still have the health to be able to qualify for it. Long-term care insurance, Michael, you've heard me say this before. Long-term care insurance is not health insurance. It's wealth insurance. It's about protecting your assets, but you need your health in order to get it. Now, having said that, there have been a lot more solutions that have come to the market today in the form of critical illness and critical care type policies and non-insurance related products that you can help a broader group of people than ever before find some kind of solution. But again, most people aren't aware of those. And unless they deal with someone like yourself or people on my team and the like, where we're aware of some of these finer, niche products, they're simply going to be told they can't get it.
Right.
And then they go away and, say, well, I guess I'm not. And that's really where part of the miss has been in our business, is that there are ways to find solutions for people. So thank you for, sort of bringing that up. You need to be aware enough to take action when you're still healthy enough to be able to qualify for it. Now, I'll throw it back to you, Bill, in this, because again, I know you and I agree about this, in the sense that one of the other key parts of awareness is that long-term care insurance is, in the past, at least in the 90s when we started, was considered nursing home insurance.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
And it's not. The statistics year after year show that it's not. If you're a couple, there's less than 1 out of 10 chance that you're going to actually go to a facility because you have a caregiving mechanism at home or structure at home that's going to help take care of you. So if you look at how these policies get paid out, and you've always been up to speed on this thing, it's more than 60% are getting paid at home. And 33% are getting paid in an assisted living facility or an adult daycare center. Mm-hmm. Less than 9% are getting paid at a nursing home. Mm-hmm. So these policies will help you stay out of the nursing home, will help you avoid the nursing home, which, as you said earlier, nobody sits around saying, I can't wait to get to that nursing home.
Yeah.
Spot on. I think a critical understanding, a critical long-term care awareness concept is that it is much more than nursing homes. Mm-hmm. The continuum of care starts at home. 80% of people who need care in America today are getting it at home. 80% of the caregivers are family. Now, not because they wanted to, it's because they had to, because that was the default plan that was there. But then we have adult daycare that helps people stay at home more efficiently from a cost standpoint. Assisted living and memory care, specially built memory care facilities on an assisted living model. And you're exactly right, Mark. Most people with long-term care insurance don't ever end up in a nursing home. Now, some do. Depending on which company or groups of policies you look at, it could be, 9% to 25% end up there. But what's interesting is people who have a plan, particularly with long-term care insurance, if they go to a nursing home, it's temporary. It's extended rehab time after Medicare stops.
Or it's end of life stuff. Right.
Or it's end of life, and it's compressed. The time frame's compressed because you've had the opportunity to have all of those other options ahead of time. Now, this is so, I deal with this every day in my practice. People look at, oh my gosh, the cost of nursing homes, 80, 90, 100,000 a year on average for a semi-private room. All true. Higher in some states and a little less in others, but 80, 90,000 a year for care in a nursing home. Here's what I tell my clients. Stop worrying about it. That's not your first problem. Your first problem is, where will you get an extra over and above your regular budget and lifestyle needs, especially if you still have a spouse or partner alive? Where will you get an extra $3,000 or $4,000 a month for part-time home care? Mm-hmm. See, most people can't afford that.
Of course.
And it gets real interesting, doesn't it, Mark? Because when we start to say, listen, I would recommend we at least do maybe a $4,000 a month policy. It's very affordable. You can afford it. It's going to cover this, this 80% of what you're most likely going to face if you have a good plan. And clients say, well, what if I go to a nursing home and it costs $10,000 or $12,000 a month? Well, first of all, you've got a $4,000 a month discount. But the reality is, you're very likely never to end up there, or not for very long. And so all of this talk, not only do I not like statistics that overblow the general risk, I don't like quote nursing home numbers. It scares people, but you know what? Fear doesn't motivate folks generally. Fear or worry is a better emotion. Does motivate people when you sit down with them and ask them, Bob, Judy, if either of you needed care, which of your kids would step in? How would you take care of each other? You know, you begin to put that personal.
Hey, someone's got to lower this. You can't be. No, baby. I'm on TV.
And that's exactly why people have long-term care insurance, because life goes on. And by the way, life goes on when you need care. Michael, I think you and I talked about this the last time I was on the show. And that is, not only do people have a misperception that it's just nursing homes or primarily nursing homes when it's a minority nursing homes, most people also think it means being flat on your back in a hospital bed, unable to do anything.
Exactly.
Even if that hospital bed's in your home.
Right. Exactly. That's what most people do think.
It starts with part-time standby supervisory experience, because that's when you're at risk and folks begin to worry about you.
So you lead into something that's very interesting here, Bill. And so for the remainder of our time, which is about 20 minutes, I'd like to see, because I always learn from you when you have these opportunities to have these kinds of open conversations. The idea, 2 weeks ago, Time Magazine, the November 4th edition of Time Magazine, had on its cover the headline, "Your robot will see you now." And it was talking about the changes on the horizon, on the immediate horizon, of how we administer care in this country, and how that's going to impact everything else, from the products that we offer to help address that, to bringing on new challenges that we can't even imagine at the moment, and again, how innovation and technology are just going to completely revamp and reinvent the entire space. I mean, you mentioned caregivers before. There's the baby boomer generation is still the fastest growing. So that means the 65 plus generation is the fastest growing in our society. And that will grow another 70% in the next 10 years. You're going to be, I don't know, the stats are anywhere from 150 to 350,000 caregivers short. In other words, more people are going to be needed to give care by a significant number than people are going to need care more than there are going to be people to administer care. And so innovation is going to have to fill the void. And whether it's with robots or with breakthroughs in medical procedures or innovations in the pharmaceutical area. Again, for example, here's a couple of things to contemplate. I believe in the next 10 years, diabetes will be able to be cured. Not just treated like a chronic illness as it is today. They have made inroads with the pancreas and other things to be able to address the reasons for diabetes, and I think that'll be cured. Dementia, which right now is, for most people, an eventual death sentence and the like, where they can't do much to stop it, I think that becomes a chronic illness in the next 10 years. So you'll take a pill and it'll stop the plaque from spreading in your brain, or you'll be able to diagnose it early enough that you can eradicate it and get rid of it before it becomes Alzheimer's or any other dementia. So those kinds of changes are going to both change the face of caregiving, but also bring on new issues that we have to deal with. And so I think as we look forward to, one of the big areas this article I remember reading brings up is the whole idea of electroceuticals. The idea that instead of medication, you'll be able to implant something in your body that, because all your brain does is send electric signals to the other parts of your body for it to do what you need it to do. These machines that they'll be able to insert in you will be able to do that. Multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, Parkinson's, stroke victims, all that will disappear because you'll be able to get the signals you need. You'll be able to wear a watch. It already exists. You'll be able to wear a watch that can read your mind and send the signals to the part of your bodies that need to move or need to work in a certain way so as to let you live a more normal life. And that will completely change the way we look at how we administer care. Any thoughts on that, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the question that I always ask is, if you don't think, and let's just take robotic care for a minute, and it's one of my sort of ideas I like to talk about. I've always been sort of a science fiction fan, and of course, as a kid, I'm going to date myself now. Remember the Jetsons, Rosie the robot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't think we are 10, maybe 20 years at the most from having that type of service and available in our home, and it might very well be led by caregiving robots, because we're going to develop things where there's the demand, and there's already an unprecedented demand and shortage of caregivers. I'm not saying you have to like the idea today. You don't have to like the idea today, and a lot of people don't. They think it's very cold, very inhuman. They don't like the concept. I don't want a robotic caregiver. Well, how about in 10 or 15 or 20 years when that's going to be part of whatever is available, because we just don't have the caregivers. Right. If you're skeptical that it's going to happen, really, I would ask you to remember what this was 20 years ago.
That's 12 years old, and look how much it's changed our life.
20 years ago, it was a bag phone. You plugged it into your cigarette lighter,
right?
And it had a cord, and you know what you could do with it? You could make a phone call.
Yeah, right.
Today we run our businesses, and we're connected to the world through these things. So that same thing's going to happen very rapidly with robotics. Now, let's Mark, talk about something that you and I talk about, and Michael, reverse mortgages and cash. Access to cash helps you plan for these things. But if you have long-term care insurance that's built on a premise that it'll pay for a licensed nursing home, assisted living, adult daycare, or a formal agency, I don't know of one long-term care policy that uses the words robots or robotics in it as a covered service. And I wrote an article recently, and the picture was a robot holding a wheelchair, just an illustration. And the title was, "Is your long-term care insurance future-proof?" And the type, Mark, this is something that we were talking about ahead of the show. You can actually buy long-term care insurance that gives you unlimited flexibility for what you pay for. You may not like robots today, but what if it's available? Or what if it's something else that we haven't dreamed up yet? How are you going to pay for that? It's a good question.
You've hit it right on the note. Again, in my opinion, and I'm biased for whatever reason, because my experience suggests it, to have, and you have the option now, to have plans that pay you in cash, do not ask you for receipts or bills that can be interpreted as to what's qualified and what's not qualified as a legitimate expense, but simply contracts to pay you cash and allows you to do whatever you want with the money. If you're and your wife are qualified to make a claim, you hit the triggers to make a claim, if you decide that you want your assisted living facility to be on an around-the-world cruise ship, then assign the thing to them and check yourself on board. I mean, you have the flexibility to do it. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm pretty sure cash isn't going to go out of style.
Right, it's exactly right.
And so if you give me the option to have cash all day long, that's what I want to do. And there's at least 3 or 4 policies that come immediately to mind that give you that option. So
we've actually seen a resurgence or a reemergence of what's called a cash benefit or cash indemnity long-term care policy, and that has been through these linked benefits with life insurance. It used to be available on a number of different traditional products, and carriers kind of backed away from it because it's a higher risk for them. That once you need care, the barn doors open and the cash starts flowing. But we're actually seeing it available now, like you said, from multiple sources, and that's exciting as a planning tool and option. I think it's really important. There's a phrase I heard recently that I really like, and Michael, it goes right to the heart of your show, the introduction that you make to each of the shows, and that's this: longevity is a risk multiplier. Take any of these risks that we talk about, health care, running out of money, being able to live and survive and pay your bills through a down market that hopefully, or we would expect, would recover at some point, and long-term care. You add longevity to any of those other risks, and it multiplies it. The risk of running out of money in retirement, if you live from 80 to 85, that's a multiplication beyond just 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
You go from 85 to 90, it's an even bigger multiplier. And for long-term care, think about it this way. If you're successful living to 80 or 85 or 90, if not longer, isn't it reasonable you can need care for a few years along the way?
It has to be.
And longevity multiplies that reasonable risk that we look at.
Never heard it that way before, Bill. It's brilliant the way to put it. But yeah. Michael, if we were going to have a takeaway, what you just heard in the last few minutes from this conversation between Bill and I and yourself, is that this is why it's so important that in this month of LTC awareness, that your viewers of this show understand they need to work with a specialist when it comes to their money, the person that's managing their money, their financial planner, their accountant, their estate planner, whoever they're working with, is probably not aware of the nuances.
No way.
They have one or two products that they've had brought to their attention. They've had it there for a long time. They know it, so they're comfortable with it. So that's what they offer their clients. A specialist like Bill is, like myself, we understand that there's not one size fits all. And we've got to probe deep enough to find that best fit and then be able to apply it. But just being aware of those options gives us an advantage to help people that the average, person that calls this their profession just simply can't match.
No, that's exactly right.
Stress that enough.
Well, without a doubt, with just a little more than 3 minutes to go, I wanted to cover a little bit of the new products. We're not going to get to that, but hopefully you guys will come back after the first of the year, or maybe even in the middle of December during the slow time, and come back and do this again with us. It just, like I said, you brought up Vegas before, as an analogy with your return of premium. Can you imagine? I forget how many tens of millions of people go to Vegas per year. I forget the number. I'm certainly one of them. But can you imagine?
45 million.
How much?
45 million a year visit.
45 million. Without me, that would be 44,999,000. But that's another subject.
So
anyway.
thank God you're going.
It's a good. I put that right over the top. But can you imagine if there was just a big sign at the Bellagio or the Venetian or the MGM that said, "Gamble all you want. If you win, you get to keep it. If you lose, we'll give it all back to you." There wouldn't be 45 million people visiting Vegas. There would be 5 billion people visiting Vegas. And that's the type of products that you have now, and I just don't get it. And like you said, Bill, a little while ago, people call when it's too late. You can't call for fire insurance when the living room's on fire. It's just amazing to me.
Actually, goes to Bill's point before. Nobody wants to think about it because the sad news is that only 7% of the population that should have it has it.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And Michael, to extend your Vegas analogy, people who say, "Oh, I'm not going to worry about it," or we ought to be able to self-fund, or we're going to take care of it ourselves, they're really not self-funding or self-insuring. Most people who say that, think that, believe that, they're betting. They're betting that it won't happen.
That's right.
And I had a friend say this to me, and going to Vegas, and Mark, I know you know this, the crack poker player that you are, self-funding or not having another plan with at least a meaningful amount of insurance, it's an all-in bet.
That's right.
You risk everything because where else can you get the money to pay for care if you haven't made a plan?
And that gets back. Yeah, that gets back to a statistic from my industry, and our industries are so similar, that the number one reason people above 65 years old go bankrupt in this country, by far, is medical bills. It's not their loss of job or anything like that. They're in their 60s and 70s. It's medical bills. It's just staggering to me. We've talked about robotics before. We only have a minute left. I want to, but we never did talk. That's the first time you've ever brought up, Mark, these implants.
Yeah, the electroceuticals. That's a huge area, and there's so much more. I mean, again, the ability to insert plastic or whatever body parts. You know, look at all the replacements. I got friends with both shoulders replaced, both knees replaced, both hips replaced. I mean, it's just the ability to just extend life by simply replacing our body parts is going to expand greatly. And it goes on and on with that. All that. Let's have another show, like you said.
Do you have anybody you think from that industry that we could bring on as a guest? That to me staggers me. That's Star Trek 23rd century.
You know what? Let me think about that. I think there's a couple people I have in mind that you could probably bring on.
There's some sort of future shock.
We got 10 seconds.
Tech folks who I think could really speak to this and your theme.
Wait a minute, 4, 3, 2. We're going out of time. Thank you both so much.